On today's video, we're going to be upgrading the brakes on the Mini. I've got some new .4 brake fluid. That's the same fluid we use on the Z. We've got some StopTech Sport pads, front and rear, and we're going to be replacing just the front rotors. The rear rotors are solid. They are not vented. They're really not doing a whole lot, and they still look like they're in really good shape. The front rotors have really bad grooving on the face of the rotor. I don't think I can save them, so I'm just going to go ahead and get these new ones. Got the nice ventilation on them, and this great black coating to keep the rust away. Got a beautiful cross hatching, so it should bed in nicely with the new pads. And of course, they're nice enough to include all this new hardware for the front and rear calipers. I'm not going to be painting the calipers, and I'm not using slotted rotors because I don't think you should draw a lot of attention to the brakes on these Minis. I don't really think it adds to the look of the car. It's a retro styled car. You're going off looks from the 60s and 70s, which people did not really emphasize their brakes back then. That's more of a modern thing. So while I love my slotted rotors on my Z, I love my bright yellow calipers, I don't think that works for the Mini. I'm going to keep everything nice and understated, but these StopTech Sport pads held up great at Road Land on the Z, so I think they'll hold up really well on the Mini, especially for some autocross duty and occasional track use. So we'll get the Mini up on jack stands and we'll start changing everything out. Alright, to change your rear brakes, you're going to need a torque wrench, some extensions, a T50 Torx bit, a 7mm Allen key, a 17mm socket, a 13mm socket, a wrench, some sort of screwdriver, pliers, anti-seize, high temperature grease, penetrating oil, of course the pads and the hardware kit that comes with it. If you're changing your rotors, you'll need that as well. And then over on the side, I've got an impact wrench and an electric ratchet I'm going to be using just to make things go a little bit more smoothly. On these cars, you're going to have to press and twist the piston back into the caliper. There's a special tool you can get from the auto parts store, or you can order one, but I'm going to show you how to get it done with the pliers in case you don't have that or don't have access to it. We'll get the car jacked up, get the wheel off, and we'll start working on the rotor. Alright, so with the wheel off, normally you need the T50 to get a set screw off that holds the rotor on, but this car is missing that, so I won't have to worry about it. To remove the caliper from the bracket, you're going to need a 7mm Allen key, and then to remove the caliper bracket from the car, you're going to need a 13mm socket. So we'll go ahead and get both of those off, clean up our rotor, and we'll put in our new pad hardware. So with the rotor out of the way, what we're going to do is mount the caliper back on the car, and then we will be able to disassemble it, and we'll be able to screw the piston back into the caliper. So you can see the piston here. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to twist it clockwise and press it back at the same time. The way we're going to do that is I'm going to take these pliers and stick them in each hole, squeeze, and I'll be able to press and turn at the same time. But to get this from sliding all the way back and sliding off, I'm going to use this extension and drop it in here. The socket on top will hold it in place, and this part of the caliper will press against the bracket and it won't move. So I'll be able to twist this and press it in at the same time. It'll only take about 5 or 6 turns to get it in, so it won't take that long. Once it's in all the way, we'll be able to put the new pads on. We're gonna have to resurface our rotor just lightly. So I'm gonna take some 200 grit sandpaper and smooth it all out. This is perfectly smooth anyway. I just wanna get out any imperfections and any pad residue that's left over from those old pads before we put our new ones on. But it's still in good shape. It's still got a lot of thickness and there's no ridge here. So these still look like they're pretty good, even though they are rusty, but that's just what happens. Nothing out of the ordinary. So let's get going so we can move on to the front. To prep the rotor, I'm going to spray it down with some brake clean and rub it with some 200 grit sandpaper. So now I have the caliper off and the piston pressed all the way back in, I'm going to remove the 2 sliders. So I'm going to clean these and re-grease them, and then I'm going to press out these 2 old bushings and then put in the new one. So with the brand new ones, I'm just going to spray a little bit of lubricant right here on this seating surface and then in the little area here where they're going to slide into. So the extra area is going to be sticking out the back of the rotor for the cap to slide into. With these in, I'm going to add just a little bit of grease to them and then slide them in from the back. The caliper that goes towards the piston has these little brackets to hold it on here, so you're going to slide it in with the top facing down so that these, which can press out because they're spring loaded, will go around the lip of the piston. Now that the guide bolts are tightened in, we can put in the new caps. We can put on the new spring. And your rotor should be able to freely spin in between the two of them, and then once we apply the handbrake or the brake pedal, this will be stopped. So we've got the caliper bracket torqued down, we've got each of the sliders torqued down, they've got nice free movement, all of our brackets clips are in place. So we can undo this wheel bolt right here. Of course, we don't have this one because it's been cut off. So we can put the wheel back on, make sure all the bolts line up, and you'll be good. Once you've got the back brakes done, the front brakes are a lot easier. It's a lot more of a normal brake setup where you just press the cylinder back in. You don't have to twist and press at the same time. It's a lot easier to deal with. The tools you're going to need is a large C-clamp, a torque wrench, a regular socket wrench, various extensions, a 16mm socket for the caliper bolts, of course a 17mm socket to take the wheels off, and it's always useful to have a flat blade screwdriver if any prying is needed. Before you do this, definitely WD-40 the bolt that is holding the rotor on. Obviously, people have had problems with that on my car in the past because all four were broken off inside the hub, so I didn't have to undo any. So if you've ever done any brake jobs before, this is going to be exactly like that. Take the caliper off, take out the old pads, put the new ones on, new rotor, very simple, nothing out of the ordinary. Once we're done with that, we will be able to bleed all of our brakes, put our wheels back on, go bed them in, and then we'll be able to review just how good they are compared to the previous setup. So here's our nice StopTech blank rotors. So I think these are going to do a great job compared to these other ones. They've got horrible grooving in them. It feels like a record almost. These have got a nice cross hatch on here that's going to help them bend into the pads nicely. Of course, we've got the StopTech Sport pads that are going to be going on. Got a nice big meaty pad material. Got room for venting, so it should be a really good option for us. It's got this nice anodized coating on here, so it's not going to rust like this old one did. Of course, it's vented, unlike the rears, which are solid. And with that, we're done. We have our new rotor, new pads. All the other pads have been replaced and the other driver's side rotor has been replaced. So all we have to do is bleed these. You've got a bleeder on each corner. We're going to start with the passenger rear and then work our way to the front. Once we get them bled, we'll be able to take them out, take some time getting them bedded in, and then once they're fully bedded in, we will be doing a test to see just how good these brake pads are. I've already run them on the rear of my Z, so I have high hopes for them. So that'll be in part 2. So this concludes part 1. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next week.